Constantinople didn't fall because the defenders weren't brave enough. It didn't fall because of some traitor or a few bad moves on the battlefield. It fell because its entire operating system, the walls, the alliances, its whole concept of war, was a legacy asset. It had zero value against a new technological reality. The moment that first cannon fired, the city was already dead. The 53 days that followed were just the paperwork.
Wow. That's a brutally deterministic way to look at it. I mean, you're talking about the Roman Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire. It stood for over 1,000 years. Are you really saying the heroism, the tragedy of the last emperor, none of that actually mattered? That feels like we're just dismissing history.
I'm saying that if we really look at it through the lens of Roger Crowley's 1453, and we dig into the logistics, the picture completely changes. Most history books frame this as a clash of civilizations, this romantic tragedy. We're stripping all that away. We're applying a systems analysis. We're looking at what happens when, let's call it a legacy conglomerate Byzantium gets liquidated by a disruptive startup, the Ottomans.
Okay, I like that framework, but conglomerate. Is it even fair to call Byzantium an empire by 1453? My understanding is the map looked a lot smaller than in its glory days.
You're right, and that's the first variable we have to get straight. It's a rump state. Think of it like a company that sold off every profitable division just to stay afloat. The empire is basically just the city itself, a few islands, a bit of Greece. It's depopulated, maybe 50,000 people in a city built for 500,000. It's vast, but empty. And financially, they're bankrupt. They're literally melting down church silver to pay the soldiers.
So the system is already completely starved of resources, but they still had the moat, right? They had the Theodosian Walls. And in the medieval world, those walls were the ultimate trump card. They'd stopped everyone. Why would this time be different?
It was a perfectly reasonable assumption for the last 1,000 years. And this gets us to our first pillar of the collapse, technological discontinuity. The Theodosian Walls were a masterpiece of mechanical defense, triple-tiered moat towers. They were designed to stop things like battering rams and catapults. Mechanical energy.
But 1453 isn't a mechanical war. We're crossing the threshold into the chemical age.
Exactly. This is Nonfiction Insights, by the way, and we're looking at the precise moment gunpowder just broke the world. And the agent of this change is a guy named Orban.
The cannon founder. I've always found his story so interesting because he's a pure mercenary, right? He's not an ideologue.
He's a Hungarian engineer. And here is the whole startup dynamic in a nutshell. Orban actually goes to the Byzantine Emperor, Constantine the first. He says, I can build you the guns to defend this city.
So the legacy player had the first shot at the new technology. That's a critical detail. It wasn't that they couldn't have it.
They couldn't afford it. Constantine literally didn't have the liquidity. He didn't have the budget for R&D. He offered Orban a small stipend he couldn't even pay regularly. So Orban walks. He goes straight to the Ottoman Sultan, Mehmed II.
Who's 21 years old, incredibly ambitious, and I'm guessing not broke.
Flush with cash. Orban basically asks, do you want a cannon that can smash the walls of Babylon? And Mehmed doesn't just say yes. He gives him unlimited funds, unlimited bronze, builds him a foundry. And the result is the Basilica cannon.
We have to describe this thing because cannon feels like way too small a word.
It's a monster. 27 feet long, cast from solid bronze. I mean, the barrel wall is 30 inches thick. This thing required 60 oxen and hundreds of men just to move it. It was a logistical nightmare.
And it's a projectile.
A stone ball weighing somewhere between 1,200 and 1,500 pounds, about half a ton. When they fired this thing, the sources say the thunder could be heard 10 miles away. It shook the ground.
That's the thing about early gunpowder, though. It's unstable, it's slow.
Extremely. They had to cool it with olive oil after every shot so the bronze wouldn't crack. You could only fire, maybe 6 or 7 times a day?
Yeah.
But here's the physics of the system failure. The walls were rigid, stone and mortar. When a 1,200-pound ball hits that at hundreds of miles an hour, the stone doesn't absorb the energy. It shatters. The wall wasn't just broken. It was conceptually obsolete.
It sounds like that thunder was as much a psychological weapon as a physical one. It was the sound of the rules changing. But this brings up a point about the Ottomans. You often hear them described as just a horde. You can't build and operate a supergun with a horde.
And you just hit on the second pillar, institutional asymmetry. The Ottoman Empire was, at this specific moment, maybe the most sophisticated military-industrial complex in the world.
How so?
It's all about supply chains.
Yeah.
Most European powers were buying their gunpowder or the ingredients from somewhere else. The Ottomans internalized it. They had domestic saltpeter refineries,
Hang on, let's unpack that. Saltpeter is potassium nitrate. It's the key ingredient, and it's notoriously hard to source. You're saying the Ottomans industrialized the production of it.
Exactly. They treated it like a strategic resource. They weren't dependent on Venetian trade routes that could be cut off. They had, military energy independence. Now, contrast that with Byzantium.
Which was, what, a committee meeting?
It's paralyzed. The city is literally being torn apart by arguments over the union of churches. The emperor is trying to merge the Orthodox and Catholic churches to get the Pope to send a fleet.
Which on paper seems logical, a merger to get a bailout.
Logical to leadership, yeah, but hated by the population. You have to remember 1204, the Fourth Crusade. The Catholics had sacked this very city. The Greeks never forgave them. So you have the Grand Duke Notar as a top official, famously saying, "I would rather see the Turkish turban in the city than the Latin mitre."
That is just, think about the psychology of that. The guy in charge of the Navy would rather be conquered by the enemy than rescued by his allies. The cultural trauma runs that deep.
That is institutional fragmentation. Constantine is begging for loans, relying on a few foreign volunteers, while his own people are rioting. Meanwhile, Mehmed II is the absolute CEO. When his own Grand Vizier argues for peace, Mehmed just silences him. Every single resource of the state is focused on one metric: take the city.
Okay, so we have a tech mismatch with the cannon and an organizational mismatch in leadership. But the city is still a peninsula. It's got water on 3 sides. They should be safe by sea, right?
And this brings us to Pillar 3, strategic adaptability. This is where the story gets really wild. The Golden Horn, the big harbor on the north side, was locked down with a massive chain stretched across the entrance. A literal iron chain floating on logs.
A simple mechanical solution. Very effective.
Incredibly effective. No Ottoman ship could get past it. So the Byzantine Navy was safe, and more importantly, they didn't need many soldiers to guard the seawalls there.
So Mehmed's stuck. He can't break the chain.
A conventional commander would keep attacking the chain. Mehmed does something completely lateral. On April 22nd, he decides to just ignore the water. He looks at the steep, wooded hill of Galata next to the harbor.
The ship's overland maneuver.
It sounds like a myth, but it was a terrifying logistical feat. The Ottomans built a greased wooden road over that hill, and in a single night, using thousands of oxen and men, they physically dragged their ships out of the water up the hill and slide them down into the Golden Horn behind the chain.
I just want to pause on that. Imagine you're a Byzantine sentry. It's night, you hear all this noise, but the Ottomans are firing their cannons to mask it.
Right, and then the sun comes up. You look over the seawall, the wall you thought was totally safe, and there was an entire Ottoman fleet, somewhere between 30 and 80 ships, just sitting in your backyard.
It changes the geometry of the battle instantly.
It invalidated their defensive map. Suddenly, Constantine has to pull troops from the land walls, where they're already getting hammered, to go defend the sea walls. He only had about 8,000 men for 12 miles of wall. This just snapped him.
Okay, so if the system was that rigged, obsolete tech, paralyzed institutions, outmaneuvered strategy, then why did the siege last 53 days? Why didn't the city just fall in a week?
And that is the crucial question. This is where a purely systems analysis hits its limits.
Yeah.
Because the walls might have been obsolete, but the people were not.
You said the walls were just shattering. How do you defend a pile of rubble?
You stop relying on the stone. This part is fascinating. The defenders innovated on the fly. Every night after the cannons stopped, the population, men, women, monks, they'd rush out and build new defenses out of timber, mounds of earth, and bales of wool.
Wool?
Yeah, wool and tapestries. Because unlike stone, the soft material actually absorbed the impact of the cannonballs better than the rigid walls did. They were patching a broken system in real time.
So it wasn't just passive defense, they were actively problem-solving.
And fighting an entire war underground. The Ottomans brought Serbian miners to tunnel under the walls, but the Byzantines had an engineer, a Scotsman named Johannes Grant.
A mercenary fighting for the losing side.
And he was a genius. He used bowls of water to detect the vibrations from the digging. He'd dig counter tunnels and flood the Ottoman mines, or fight them hand-to-hand in the dark. Grant stopped every single attempt.
So this wasn't a case of incompetence at all. The defenders were highly skilled, tactically brilliant.
They absolutely were. The Genoese commander Giustiniani and Emperor Constantine were fighting right there on the ramparts, repelling assault after assault. But, and this is the tragedy, they were fighting a war of attrition they could not possibly win. They were patching a broken system while Mehmed was scaling a new one. Mehmed could rotate fresh troops onto the line every few hours. Constantine had soldiers who were literally fainting from hunger and exhaustion at their posts.
It's the classic difference between tactical success and strategic failure. You can win the fight today, but you can't fix the fact that you have no food, no money, and no relief army on the way.
Exactly. And that brings us to the final liquidation. May 29th, the final assault. Mehmed throws everything at them, sea and land, all at once. He sends in his irregular troops first, just to wear the defenders down, then his Anatolian infantry, and then finally the Janissaries, his elite shock troops.
And this is where the whole story pivots on one tiny, tiny detail. The Kirkaporta Gate.
The Kirkaporta.
Yeah.
A small side gate. Someone, we still don't know who, left it unlocked. Or maybe the latch was just damaged.
In a healthy system, a small error like that gets contained. You send reserves, you counterattack. A single unlocked door doesn't end an empire.
But Byzantium had no reserves left. Zero. When the Janissaries find that door, they pour through. And at that exact same moment, Giustiniani, the commander holding the whole line together, gets hit by a crossbow bolt. He's bleeding badly. He asks to be taken off the line.
And that's the cascade failure. The morale just collapses.
The defenders see their commander leaving. They see the Ottoman flags going up over a tower. Panic. The line doesn't retreat, it dissolves. And Constantine, the capital of the emperor, he sees it's over. He tears off his imperial ornament so he can't be identified, and he just charges into the wave of oncoming Janissaries.
He was never seen again.
Never. The emperor just vanishes into the fall of his city.
So the fall wasn't a battle defeat. It was a liquidation.
Exactly. The Byzantine assets, the location, the trade routes, were acquired by a more efficient operator. Mehmed moves his capital there, renames it, and the city booms again as the center of a new world order.
That's a really tough pill to swallow if you want to focus on the romance and the tragedy. But what's the lesson here for us? What's the takeaway?
I think we all face what I'd call an Orban moment.
Define that.
An Orban moment is when you're presented with a new talent or a new technology that doesn't fit your budget or your tradition or your current business model, and you let it walk away. Constantine let Orban walk because he was broke. But the cost of not hiring Orban was his entire civilization.
He was managing the budget of the past instead of investing in the survival of the future.
Exactly. If you're relying on a legacy moat, like the Theodosian Walls, to protect you, and a competitor shows up who has fundamentally changed the physics of the game, you're already dead. You just haven't done the paperwork.
It also says so much about relying on alliances, on white knights showing up to save you.
Never build a system that depends on it. Venice and Genoa were looking at their own balance sheets. They weren't going to bankrupt themselves to save a dying competitor.
It really hammers home that difference in mindset. The Byzantines were obsessed with preserving the past,
While the Ottomans were obsessed with acquiring the future, they didn't care that Orban was a Christian or that their best tactics were copied from the Hungarians. They took the best tools from everywhere, regardless of ideology.
Survival belongs to the adaptable, not the pure.
That's it. To put it in, like, video game terms, Byzantium is player 1. They have a maxed out base from the last level, but no money to upgrade their units. The Ottomans are player 2. They've got unlimited resources, and they just unlocked a whole new tech tree called siege artillery. Player 1 plays a perfect defensive game, makes 0 mistakes.
But player 2 just spams the attack button until the base breaks.
Exactly. The thunder of that cannon wasn't just a noise, it was the sound of the Middle Ages ending.
So it wasn't a failure of courage, it was a failure of structure.
There's this one haunting detail. When Mehmed finally walked into the city, he went to the Hagia Sophia. And the chronicles say he saw all the destruction, and he poured a handful of dust over his head.
A gesture of humility.
He knew. He quoted a Persian poem. The spider weaves the curtains in the palace of the Caesars. He understood that systems rise and fall, that one day his own system would become the legacy asset. But for that moment, the world of walls and knights was gone. The modern era of gunpowder and empires had begun.
And if you want to understand the systems behind history, not just the stories, you should subscribe to the channel.
This has been a deep dive from Nonfiction Insights.